And the next day we had a meeting at Universal, and I wasn't supposed to come along apparently, but Arnon got me to come along, and unfortunately I arrived on time. Arnon never arrives on time, and so I arrive, go into the Black Tower and announce myself, and there's a moment of embarrassment because I'm not supposed to be there. This is supposed to be a meeting of the men, the adults, not the kids. And it was a meeting in Frank Price's office, who was head of production then. And I remember going up there, and it was like being brought into the headmaster's office, that I had done a very, very bad thing.
No one else in that meeting remembers it as being quite as contentious as Terry does. But they were thinking as businessmen, not artists. And Frank Price's suggestion that the film be shortened got Terry's back up.
We knew that in the contract it said it was 2 hours and 15 minutes was what the length of the film was supposed to be. And I was coming in at 2 hours and 22 minutes, but yeah, come on, we're friends. What's a few minutes, 7 minutes. And I think Arnon was probably at the time pushing me to get it down, but I couldn't see how to get it down. And so we submitted it at 2 hours and 22.
That's one of those elementary things that if you're going, you want 2 screenings at night. Certainly if you have an adult film, it's an economic handicap to be able to only have 1 screening. So if you get too long, that's your problem. So anytime with a long film, you need to have that conversation.
And he, had real problems with it and felt, well, it's clearly it's too long, Terry, and maybe really what I think a good place to cut this film would be when they finally go to bed together and they fly off into the sunset. Perfect. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, boy, every happy ending. And that would be a great way to end it, Terry. And I said, well, that would be a Frank Price film, not a Terry Gilliam film. And my name's on the credit at the moment. He didn't know how to take that.
2 days later, Brazil was previewed for an audience recruited from psychology and philosophy courses at nearby UCLA. The way Universal's marketing people saw it, the audience, if anything, was stacked in favor of the film. And according to them, it did not go well.
That's right, and that was a disaster. Well, I think there were walkouts and everything else. It was a picture you could only. It was a picture that I know from the beginning was a cult film. You get an audience in if you got reviews, but the general audience would never like this film. They wouldn't get it, and they wouldn't like it.
The problem is I knew it was a wonderful film because I'd been to France and seen it. I'd seen the reviews there. I'd been around Europe. I'd seen how it played. I knew it didn't play for everybody. I knew I'd seen the people walking out of the cinemas. I knew for a lot of people it was complete rubbish. It was offensive. It was irritating. It was an assault on their senses. It was kind of, I kept saying it was cinematic rape. We got them in there and then we get them into a dark corner and we beat the shit out of them in the movie. And so I knew it was all of those things. And I knew, on the other hand, that for others, it was just magic. It transported them. It said everything about the world that they felt. So I was a happy guy. I don't want to please everybody.
I think I must have believed, and I do believe, that things can be done vis-a-vis the length and possibly other things in connection with this picture that would make this picture more accessible. The term I kept using with Terry Gilliam really is accessible. He has his own recollection of things, some of which I wonder where he gets, but nonetheless, I have always believed that there is a picture that is brilliant in parts, that is too long, and that is, in essence, difficult to access for an audience.
Clearly the audience it was intended for didn't know what to make of it, so Sid was caught in the middle. And yet I think in his fatherly way felt he could take this young and obviously foolish filmmaker and whip him into shape and take what was clearly fantastic material and blend it into something that could be a wonderful and great and commercially successful film. And again, when he didn't understand that he wasn't part of the creative process.
Terry, emotionally exhausted, returned to London with instructions to cut the film further.
I'm not going to make a film unless I've got total control of it. That's why I do so few, I guess. And this, I had a final cut, which always makes it more difficult to get films off the ground because studios don't like to give up any power. But I had final cut. So I made the film, and what became interesting at the end and one thing we should actually say is the film had come out in Europe. Fox had accepted the film at 2 hours and 22 minutes as we made it, no problem, and had gone out. And it was in the States where the time limit thing became, it was the stick they could hit us with. It was the one thing they could do. So that's why I cut it down. But even then, they wouldn't accept it, and they were delaying, they were doing everything. And Arnon was getting more and more panicky about not getting the money. And so eventually, he came to me, and I don't know why I was in Paris, but I was there, and he came and with this piece of paper, which was just a face-saving piece of paper. It really didn't mean, I mean, it said things, but it didn't really mean them, because this was just face-saving for everybody, which was basically that I gave up my final cut. I gave up my rights on the film. And that would then, he would get the money, and then they would basically lose the piece of paper, and everybody would be happy. And of course, that isn't what happened.
Had Arnon not been so anxious for the second payment, Terry could have still cut and delivered a version below 2 hours and 5 minutes, and the studio, as Sid acknowledged, would have had no options.
Now, I think if there is one thing that the record should show, above all things that are likely to be said in connection with this tedious subject, had Mr. Gilliam cut this picture and reduced it to 2 hours and 5 minutes and delivered it, that would have been the end of the matter. Now, Mr. Gilliam goes on and on and on about Sid Sheinberg doesn't like the length. I mean, doesn't like the ending. He'd like the ending change or other things he doesn't like. The fact of the matter is that had he shortened it, even late in the game, prior to this amendment, we would have had no alternative. But whether we liked it or didn't like it, but to pay the money and release the picture, because he would have complied with the condition of length.
The 2 hour and 11-minute version that Terry edited with the cumulus fade-out suggested by Sheinberg was also rejected, and the studio's lawyers informed the filmmakers that Universal was invoking its right to assume control of Brazil.
It all ended in having to send the lot out to LA, where a team of editors working on, I guess under the supervision of Sid, were recreating Brazil, and they had decided that the theme of the film was Love Conquers All, which is the first I had realized that's what we had made, but it was nice, And they started to work on this thing. And I don't know where it was going. And I would get calls from the editor occasionally wanting my input. I said, what do you mean you want my input? Yeah, but we're saving your film. No, you're killing my film. You're destroying it. You've taken the child and you're asking which limb do you want chopped off? His right leg, his left leg? Come on. And that's what you're asking me. You're not asking. And he was shocked. He couldn't understand that I wouldn't cooperate in every possible way to get that film out. And I said, no, but we made the film. There it is. You got what we made. That's it. There's nothing more, nothing less. That's the thing. And after a couple of those phone calls, I mean, I didn't take the calls anymore, but he was shocked that I could be so uncaring about my work. I mean, that's how they read it. That's what's wonderful, that I'm the irresponsible one. I'm the one that doesn't care. I'm the one that's walking away from my responsibilities as the creator of this thing. I mean, Sid, what was interesting in all of this, they all use those words like responsibility and I mean, to be honest, at the time I remember my vocabulary was reduced to nothing, because all the important words, all the words about artistry, responsibility, honesty, creativity, audience, storytelling, they had taken all these words, and I was left with nothing but fuck, shit, piss. And so that was all the vocabulary I was left with, which I used. Fuck you, shit, piss. And they could use responsibility, they could talk in serious tones and sound like they were the ones who really, really cared about Brazil and the audience. And